Welcome to the MRO Exchange, Connecting Healthcare Executives, your go-to podcast for staying informed in the dynamic healthcare world, where MRO discusses industry trends and topics with prominent healthcare leaders. In each episode, we delve into the intricate landscape of the U.S. healthcare system, shining a light on the immense responsibility shouldered by providers to effectively acquire, manage, and share clinical data with data consumers. Join MRO experts and healthcare executives as they navigate the important dynamics within this highly complex environment. From the surge in healthcare ecosystem demands to the influx of structured and unstructured data scattered across diverse systems, along with the ever-growing compliance, security, and privacy expectations, the MRO Exchange, Connecting Healthcare Executives, unravels it all for you. Tune in for a comprehensive exploration of the pressing issues shaping the healthcare industry today.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to The Exchange, where we connect with healthcare executives on important topics facing the healthcare industry. I'm your host today, Don Hardwick. You can learn more about MRO on our website at mrocorp.com and can connect with me on LinkedIn. Today, we're going to be talking about managing your workforce in a remote environment, and more specifically, we'll be addressing three important items. Number one is, how has the reality of a remote workforce changed operational management? Second is, how has your organization structure changed as a result of remote workforce? And third, how has the scope of training and monitoring remote staff changed in order to retain high quality, high production? And to do so, I have joining me today MRO's Senior VP of Operations, Moira Washington. So welcome, Moira.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, and thanks for having me back. I thought I was never going to get to come back. It's been a while.
It is such a pleasure to have you on today. The listeners really appreciated your topic conversation that we had before, and so this is a good follow-up to what's transpired since our last discussion. So I'll go ahead and start off here. First of all, the employee workforce didn't snap back to the everyday routine that we saw before of coming into the office when the pandemic, kind of subsided. Yeah. So that said, tell our listeners a little bit about the scope of your field operations before we get into those questions, such as the states you operate in, the number of employees you oversee, and then we'll jump into those three major questions.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It didn't snap back at all, right? In fact, what we ended up with is an entirely new normal that we had to figure our way through. But it's been interesting, since we came out of the pandemic, we have definitely been in growth mode, continue to grow, didn't slow us down, which was great. So at this point, in my little part of the world, I've got a little bit over 1,500 employees.
Moira, that's not a little bit. That's a whole lot.
I know. It's crazy how much we're growing. It really is. So 1,500 people, but 65% of them are remote these days, which if you go back to pre-pandemic, it was maybe 15-20% were remote and the rest of them were working on site. So 65% remote, which means we've really had to change how we approach things. And at this point, they are spread across 40 plus different states in the US where we have folks based at the moment.
So thank you for that overview. The last time we had you on the show, that was probably an increase of 40% of your staff coverage operationally that you're managing, which is pretty significant. So how has the new reality, going back to the first question, of your workforce changed your operational management?
So it's really different, right? And I know, everyone's read a lot about this and heard a lot about it, but there's no more water cooler, right? There's no more stopping by somebody's cubicle to say, hey, Susie, how are you doing today? So you have to be much more intentional about the outreach that our management teams are doing to make sure that people really feel connected and they feel seen and heard by their managers. So, obviously technology is huge. We have, like many companies, we have gone big on Teams. We launched that after the pandemic and have really onboarded that and embraced that fully at this point. So that for a lot of our managers, as far as how they interact with their employees on a daily, weekly, hourly basis, they're utilizing Teams. So, obviously you can chat, you can turn your camera on, you can check in with people, you can bring teams of people together, you can interact together on documents. It's very intuitive as far as how to use it. So Teams has been huge. Also, what I've seen a lot of is groups of employees, that maybe work on one particular client. They will have a group chat going at all times. It never goes away. It is continuous. And that's how they talk back and forth with one another. So if they have a question about maybe they're stuck on something, or they want to see how somebody else has dealt with something, it's just this continuous chat that sits there all day. So instead of talking across the top of the cubicles now, right, talking to the person next to you, you're just using that continuous chat to
maybe you ought to coin a new phrase, call it some type of water cooler interaction. That's awesome.
It's the new water cooler. So Teams has really been huge, and our IT team did a really amazing job of hitting the fast forward button on getting all of that implemented for us, because it became a huge need after when you've got 65% of your folks working from home. So that's been really important for us. We've also launched a new platform called Props, which is a way for us to give recognition to our teams. And it's almost set up kind of like social media, like somewhat like, like an Instagram or a Facebook. And, I guess I feel my age sometimes where I'm like, oh, geez, another social media. But we got to understand that that's how a lot of generations want to communicate. So that's also a great, when someone's done something really great, it's a great way of us logging in and giving feedback that way. And there's also incentives tied to that as well. Or rewards rather, we can assign them some points that are worth money at the end of the day. So we're not only saying thank you, we're actually putting something behind it. So that's been really great. And that was just launched fairly recently, but so far has gotten great uptake. All of that being said, nothing takes away from the old-fashioned check-in, right? Your manager, whether they're picking up the phone or they're calling you via Teams, whatever they're doing, that one-on-one where your manager's stopping to say, how are you doing? Let's review your output maybe from yesterday. Maybe it was great. Maybe it needs a little bit of work. How are you doing on a personal level, right? Just that check-in. Nothing beats that, right? So we can talk about all the great technology, but for me, it always comes back to the old-fashioned. Are you speaking one-on-one, not via a messaging app, but actually talking to your employee, preferably with the camera on so you can see their face and you can see how they're feeling, because that's a whole nother language that someone's speaking at that point. And that's really super important.
That's how you maintain the humanistic portion that we used to have in that face-to-face environment. You're still capturing that face-to-face, just in a technology-based method.
Yeah. Another thing that we are getting ready to launch this summer is a mentorship program for our supervisors, frontline managers, because again, when you were in the workforce, it was easy to even have informal mentorships that set up, right? Somebody that you click with, a more tenured, seasoned manager that you just learn from. And it's a little bit more difficult in a remote environment. So we're working on a mentorship program that will have some peer-to-peer mentorship, as well as, pairing people up with seasoned managers, really to help continue, because you've got to continue to develop that whole layer of leadership as well. We can't expect people to just exist in a silo and get better. There's got to be some level of communication there and mentorship and coaching going on. So all of that is happening.
Have you, on the supervisory and managerial level, have you found that maybe today we are putting together face-to-face meetings differently than we did before COVID, or is it just continued the same as it was before COVID?
Well, it becomes a lot more difficult to physically come together now. And we do still have teams who do, they'll stop and we'll have them pull together for lunch, or sometimes they'll do something a little bit different. But also, we have employees who relocated. And if you are a really great, high quality employee, and maybe you're working in Pennsylvania today, and you say, for various reasons, I need I'm going to Texas. And if you're in a remote work environment for the client that you're working on, there's no reason for us to say no to that anymore, right? So it's great. We get to retain really great talent. We don't have to wait for an opening in Texas. We tell them, sure, you can go to Texas, but it becomes a lot more difficult, right? The physically coming together becomes more difficult at that point, which is where, again, back to the technology and the cameras. But from a leadership perspective, we are absolutely continuing to pull them together twice a year. Everybody comes in. We just did one a little bit earlier this year in Nashville, and you really cannot beat that level of networking and people actually being face to face with one another.
I agree. I mean, the humanistic side is part of what makes companies stand out, is that you still have that opportunity to meet face to face, to develop behind the scenes relationships that otherwise there's part of it that's satisfied with technology, but nothing ever replaces that, face to face, in person, let's go to have dinner or whatever, and develop that relationship that goes a long way. Then it's almost like a mentorship in an indirect way, because you've got a pal that you can bounce ideas off of that otherwise you might not be able to do it. I'm glad to hear that you're still, or doing those a couple times a year, bringing all your management staff.
We are. There's a cost element to it, but there's also a cost element to not doing that. So it's important to balance that out.
Very good point. Sometimes the one out costs the other, and the part of having people together may be minimal cost compared to losing good employees, especially at a managerial level.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the org structure here today. Has your organization structure changed because of the remote environment? Meaning, have you had to add any layer or additional managerial staff, or are you able to retain the ratio of managers to field operations the same as you did in a personal or face-to-face environment?
Sure. So, it's interesting. It hasn't materially changed. And I think there were some thoughts back at the beginning that, okay, people are working from home. We can probably have managers oversee a much higher number of people than when they're physically in front of them. And it really hasn't been the case. Not if you want to manage effectively, not if you want to have that continuous feedback. And have people coached and mentored and just able to answer the questions that come up on a day-to-day basis. So those ratios haven't significantly changed. It's just been the way that the managers manage and interact with their employees. That piece of it has definitely changed, and that's there was a learning curve over time with that.
Managers on hiring, field labor, field staff, remote staff, have you had to change any of your hiring practices or the types of candidates when you're hiring new employees that would be more suited to a remote environment versus a direct environment within a facility, within a hospital facility?
Yeah. So I think the core things that you're looking for don't change, right? You're looking for, in our line of business, people that have high level of attention to detail. That's really important. We're looking for folks that can take feedback and pivot appropriately, that have a strong work ethic and that have a great personable type of personality that we can work with. So none of that changes. Certainly when we're looking at a remote position versus an on-site position. If it's an on-site position, quite often it's somebody who is handling a front desk. So there's someone who would be dealing with, patients as they walk in. So there's a very specific type of person we look for there. You have to have a high level of empathy and EQ to be in that position. Not quite as necessary if you're working from home and you don't have a whole lot of interaction with patients or really any requesters. We really just need you to be working with the data. But I think the core elements of what we're looking for really haven't changed from that perspective.
So I'll change a little bit here from the org structure and how you hire to more of, once you've hired, that staff, how, if any, has your scope of training, and then once they're significantly trained, how you monitor that remote person's quality and their productivity has what tools have you put into place and expectations have you put into place to then have a satisfied, productive person, and on the other side, the humanistic side, that they're satisfied being in a remote environment?
Yeah. So we were lucky in that when we had to flip over to remote, already a lot of our training was done online. All of the initial, you come in the door, onboarding, voluminous amounts of training that we have, that was all been done online, as well as the annual recertifications. But the piece that has changed is we have added in what we call them is micro trainings. And there's 2 or 3 per month, and there usually will be 2 or 3 that are sort of addressed directly towards hourly employees, and then we have 2 or 3 that are for management specifically. And they are not mandatory. You can sign up for them if you want. If you choose not to, you don't have to. And they have been spectacularly popular and successful. I love watching the Teams chats that come off of them as well. And what it occurred to me is that, again, in the old days when we were on site, a manager or supervisor might be walking past somebody's desk and they might stop because they've got a question for them. Oh, hey, can I ask you this question? And then you start looking at something and they say, oh, I have a better way to do this. Let me show you. And they were very sort of sporadic in the moment type of interactions that would happen. But it was training, right? It's a manager saying, oh, let me take this opportunity to show you how to do something a little bit better. And it occurred to me that these micro trainings have kind of taken the place of that happening. And they're really short. They're like 10 or 15 minutes. They're set up by our operations support team. And they are out in the field and talking to people constantly. So they constantly are coming up with ideas of new little things or questions they've been asked that they say, oh, let's do a micro training on that. And the uptake has been tremendous. The chatter that comes off of the teams, because they're teams meetings, has been tremendous. And people just absolutely love them. So that has kind of been another way that we have addressed how do you just constantly make sure that you're getting that feedback and showing people better ways to do things and just moving the effort forward.
That's great. I'm going to ask you the tough question here. Yeah. Is how do you address, monitor, how do you track, for lack of better terms, distraction creep?
Yeah, no, it's huge, isn't it? It's essentially trust but verify. So we do have monitoring in place, and our team knows that. And we're monitoring for a couple of different things. First of all, we are looking at what we call releases per hour. So how many requests per hour on average in a day or a week you are releasing. And, we take into account the client that they're working on, their EMR that they're operating in, to set goals. We have baselines, so we know what we're expecting from each person. So that's the baseline that we're looking at. And if someone's falling below that, certainly we're going to have a conversation with that staff member. We also monitor gaps. So we have some pretty robust BI dashboard in place that monitors the punches in and out of our payroll system, along with the activity that's taking place in ROI Online, also known as Exchange Manager. And it will put them up against one another. And essentially what we're looking for are gaps of about half an hour or more. And we identify those, and once every pay period, we identify employees that we see there's an excessive amount of gaps here. And essentially that information goes back to their manager. Their manager will talk to them. There might be a reason. They may have been training in our MRO Academy platform. We're not monitoring activity over there. All things that can be validated. It could be something going on. They could have just simply forgotten to punch out for lunch. It happens, right? It's not abnormal. Or it could be that we've got a little bit of a problem and somebody can't quite explain why there was absolutely no activity in the system for 30 or 40 minutes. So, we're not immediately going to any sort of discipline in that instance, but once you've had a conversation like that with your manager, the expectation is that doesn't happen again. So it's unfortunate that there have been employees that we have had to move along because they've just had too much unexplained downtime, and we've gone down a different path there. So we're looking at that. That's how we're monitoring. And then on the flip side of it, so we monitor all of this, and sometimes you have employees just do a great job. Their productivity is off the charts. So we have a program called Pursuit of Excellence, and it monitors your productivity also monitors your quality, right? We want to make sure we don't have any improper disclosures. And we do that on a team level. And the teams that are the most successful, there's monetary rewards for those teams every single month. So it's not all about necessarily, clearly you're looking for the gaps, you're looking for the issues, but we're also looking to shine the light on the people that are really going above and beyond and saying, thanks, let us give you a little bit something extra this month for doing such a great job.
Yeah, and the one's doing a great job. I think there's a commercial out there that talks about rock stars, and we use that term as a rock star. But there are people that are, their personality, their environment is set up and suited for that remote opportunity to work from home. Yeah. They can adapt. They don't allow the distractions, and they thrive in that environment.
And the other thing that I'll just mention is, we are really clear with our staff members that we've got a heavily female population in the ROI specialist job title. So we're really clear with them that, it's okay if you want to log on and start work at 6 a.m. That's fine. If you can be productive then, that's great. If you need to stop at 7 to go get the kids on the bus, totally fine. You can do that. That's the beauty of this position, that you can do that. You just need to remember to punch out. And then once the kids are on the bus, back, come back to your desk, sit down, punch back in, continue. And you can do that throughout the your workday, as long as you are punching in and out appropriately. You've got that flexibility to deal with whatever it may be, kids, pets, parents, whatever it may be.
Well, there's all kinds of reasons that people need to stop, go take care of some personal business. There's 1,000 different, legitimate reasons. And it seems like the remote environment is going to be here forever. Yeah. I don't see in our world today that it going back to the way it was, because of exactly what you're talking about, that flexibility. In terms of that, how have you received the feedback from your staff? Do you survey your staff to see how they're liking the environment? Are there ways to improve that environment for all your employees that are working remote? How have they responded to the expectations and meeting those expectations?
Yeah, I would say in general, it's been good. Honestly, I think that most people do want to understand what the expectations of their job are. There's a few outliers out there, but most people, they want to understand the expectations, and then they want some feedback, whether they're hitting the mark, exceeding the mark. If they're not hitting the mark, they want some support and coaching to bring them up to the mark. So in general, it's been great. Obviously we do our annual employee surveys. Generally, those results are very positive. We continue to win some, best workplace awards, throughout the year as well. So hopefully that's all an indicator that for the most part, we're doing something right.
So you mentioned earlier, I'll go back to this kind of question here, but going back to the volume and the growth that we've had over the years, or at least since our last conversation, how has that growth, how have you adapted to the growth? Has it been more of a technology development or more of an add-on for more labor because of that growth?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of both. Obviously the peer reviews, risk adjustments, anybody listening here, I'm sure, has a lot of experience with that and knows that these numbers have gone through the roof over the last few years. So at the moment, we're highly focused in on the technology side of the solution for this. Auto retrieval has been a main focus for the last year. That is up and running at this point. It's successfully implemented, multiple clients right now. Of course, what we're doing is we're going after the request types that are very repeatable, same kind of set of records that we're looking at time and again. So we started off with risk adjustment. That's the sort of logical place to start. And there are some more use cases there as well. So we're going to continue to expand upon that. We'll go to provider requests, potentially itemized bills, disability, are all requests that would lend themselves to auto retrieval and some sort of technology response there. It doesn't mean, though, that we are shedding labor. We continue to grow as a company. And so what it's allowing us to do is take our ROI specialists that are already, we've put a lot of time and effort into training them. They know what they're doing, and we're able to repurpose them and move them around as needed as we bring on new clients. So rather than hiring from the outside, and you may get some green folks there, you're getting seasoned ROI specialists that understand what they're doing, and they're focused on the complex type of requests, because I guess eventually somebody will figure out how to automate pulling the records for a court order or a subpoena, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I gotta tell you, there's nuances there that really need a human. So that's how we've managed to sort of expand there. And, we really have been very clear with our team members that it's not something to fear, the technology piece of it. It's not necessarily going to replace them. It's going to allow us to continue to grow and keep the team that we have together and allow them to focus in, like I said, on the sort of complex type of requests. And somebody said it earlier, actually, today, that, you shouldn't be scared. If you're working for a company that's implementing this type of technology, you should be scared if you're working for a company that isn't, because there's a good chance that they're not going to be around in the long term. And I think we're securing our future for our team members right now.
There aren't many buggy whip companies out there anymore.
They kind of went extinct.
Yeah, exactly. Any other lessons that you want to share with our audience that you've learned for the past couple of years since our previous conversation that we haven't covered today?
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, remote work is here to stay. It's not going away. I think technology is fantastic and has really helped us adapt to this new normal that we have. But, it doesn't replace that human interaction. That piece never goes away. And I just think what's going to be important for us moving forward is just continuously looking at our workforce. We're bringing in younger, newer generations, and we need to really understand how they prefer to be communicated with, right? Just because I like to communicate a certain way doesn't mean that one of my daughters, for example, who are in their early 20s, wants to communicate in the same way. And we need to just keep our eye on the ball there and make sure that we are adapting as we move forward.
The moving forward piece is going to happen no matter what, that's for sure. And it's all going to be centered around technology. There's just no two ways about it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I want to tell you how much I appreciate having you on the show. It's always interesting. So thank you for joining us today. It's certainly been my pleasure having you here.
Right back at you. Thanks for having me back.
So thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. And be sure to give us a listen on our future episodes. And until we talk again, I'm your host, Don Hardwick.
You've been listening to the MRO Exchange, where we connect healthcare execs. For more insights and to hear other healthcare executives' exchanges, visit the show's page on MROcorp.com and be sure to explore additional resources and thought leadership articles. You can also check out the program page on healthcarenowradio.com. Finally, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn or X at MRO Corp. Until we talk again, this is the MRO Exchange, where healthcare execs connect.